We're back, and we did chapter 10 last week with a little revisit of chapter 9 as well, and we're moving on to chapter 11. And you probably picked up on Sunday, even though it was Trinity Sunday, we're back in Matthew after a long spell without Matthew as our prime gospel lesson on Sundays. So for the better part of the next 6 months, you'll hear Matthew each Sunday, and it not always will go in order. It will kind of jump around, but I remember the first summer I was serving in a church before I was a priest. I was in seminary. It was year A, and it was the first time I was really preaching before an actual congregation, like in earnest, like every 6 weeks or so, you know. And it was Matthew, and I just remembered, oh, it's another parable. Here we go. Another Sunday, another parable. So some of the stuff you'll be hearing again very soon.
I thought it was weird that the first reading was all about the creation after just finishing up Curveball.
Yeah, you mean on Sunday?
Yeah, I can't
Trinity Sunday
about quantum theory and all.
Exactly, yeah, and a good reminder of that it's poetry. Kudos to Greg for reading it. Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things that sneaks up on you in the lectionary. It's every 3 years, but that year A one always programs Genesis 1. Yeah. And if you remember, that's what Sharon used as her text. Yeah. So anyway,
it's got to be the longest reading in election.
It's the longest one, yeah.
Except for the Passion.
Well, the Passion's the longest.
Yeah,
right.
That's true. The Passion.
But that's usually divided between a lot of people. So
yeah.
Well, here.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
You know, at 5 p.m. Saturday, Steve Snyder and Sue Ann Snyder both read it, and they alternated paragraphs.
Oh.
So like he did day 1, 3, and 7, and she did day 2, 4, 6. They had a good solution to it.
So there they are.
Yeah. They like that Saturday one.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that they were there. So he came to church one Sunday morning. I haven't seen them at all.
Well, they go to Florida now for the winter.
Well, I know.
Early spring, but when they came back, they kind of are 8 o'clock or Saturday 5 p.m. Yeah. Okay, that's not Bible study, but anyway, we're back. It was my fault. I digress. So we're on chapter 11, and let's see where we're at. I just can't quite remember where we are, but in storytelling. But I know you just finished a great passage. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. You've heard that many times, I'm sure.
So he finished Sermon on the Mount. He's just sent his disciples off.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going to read the NRSV, and that is chapter 11. I'll find a good stopping point. 30. Okay. Now, when Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and proclaim his message in their cities. When John heard in prison that what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out and see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal palaces. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly, I tell you, among those born of women, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John came. And if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who is to come. Let anyone with ears listen. But to what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. And we'll stop there. There's a lot packed in there. This passage, especially the pieces about John, should be a little familiar because we heard them in Advent. If you remember, Advent has the same structure in all 3 lectionary years. The first Sunday is all about an apocalyptic telling of the end times in the second coming. Then the second and third weeks of Advent are given to John, and they're either accounts of John's baptism of Jesus, or just John crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way, and then usually the fourth Sunday is a little bit more about Mary or Joseph. So this was ours in, I think, the third, maybe second or third week of Advent, and it was about, and it's interesting because I think this only happens in Matthew. It might happen in Mark a little bit, but you have this kind of account of John already in prison from Herod Antipas.
So I'm clicking, why, if when John the Baptist baptized Jesus and he recognized him as the Messiah, why is he questioning it now?
It's a great question. It's a great question that I don't have the answer to. But I've preached on this before, and my suspicion, and I think, it's we don't have too much to go on, but I think if you think in a very human way, if you imagine you're John and you've been preaching for several years and baptizing that the Messiah is coming, and then he actually arrives and you baptize him, and then soon after you get arrested, and then you're sitting in prison for months probably, and he's not hearing anything until people are allowed to visit him, and he's kind of wondering, was I right? Did I make it all up? And I kind of like that, because often we're presenting John as if he knows everything, but remember, John's human. Jesus can know things, but John doesn't. He's got certainty. But I think you understand from his predicament, he's doubting, is this really what's happening? And Jesus doesn't respond saying, yes, it's me. He lists all the things that are kind of dovetailing from John's preaching of things that are happening, the dead rising, it's beautiful. And it's supposed to kind of comfort him and say, oh, no, you were right. You were right.
Because actually John recognized him twice as the Messiah, because he left in his mother's womb when Mary
exactly
got to Elizabeth's house. So
I think that's very perceptive, Greg.
Thank you.
It gives us a reassurance that even the most stalwart and strong people in times of testing have questions. It's not all about always having absolute faith, but sometimes in the times of testing and trial, we all have doubts, and that Jesus didn't rebuke him or anything like that. He just said, here's the evidence, and it's very reassuring to me that, I don't always know the answers, but Jesus understands, and he just, answers with words of reassurance. You were right,
It's almost, to me, it's kind of a piece of this, it's a different gospel writer, but the repentant thief at the crucifixion, remember me when you come into paradise. It's just when you're really backed into a corner and you're kind of at death's door, or you're, John's lost everything. There is that twinge of, I really, really want to believe. Can you just give me some, proof, and I think there are kind of pearls on the same necklace, to me, at least. It's beautiful. I think it's really cinematic. Like, I could picture a really talented actor playing John and just sitting, in chains to a wall, and somebody's telling him these words, the blind, Jesus said to tell you this, the blind receive their sight. And you could just picture, him just sitting there, just welling up with tears, going like, oh my God, it's real. Yeah.
How long do we know how long John was in prison before he was executed?
Doesn't say, but it can't be very long. Months, maybe weeks. If I'm not mistaken, we will come back to John in this gospel and talk about his death.
Okay.
Yes,
And he
that's
was
later.
imprisoned by,
Herod the son.
so it was that, it was not the Romans who imprisoned him, but
No,
it
it's
was.
Herod.
it
Yeah.
was- okay,
So
Hebrews.
even though Herod is politically aligned with the Romans, he's a Jewish
Mhm.
king,
But
Judean king.
Didn't
Yeah.
he imprison him initially because John was dissing him because he married his,
Yeah, he's calling him a
brother's wife?
hypocrite. Yeah.
and he was like shouting it all over.
Yeah.
the
Herod
town.
Antipas was
An adulterer.
the Vladimir Putin maybe of his day, just
Yeah.
going up, I'm gonna arrest my critics and put them in jail. Yeah.
Mhm.
little
Well,
more.
and also in context, I think his wife was the one that was really the driving force behind the beheading of John, and maybe even imprisoning. We don't know, but
Right.
John's criticism of Herod was because of her, and I think she took it very personally. In fact, so personally that she got her daughter to get Herod all worked up by having her daughter dance. And after he was so impressed by the dance, he said, "Well, ask whatever you want, I'll give it to you." And
Yeah.
she went, and her mother said, "Yeah, ask for the head of John the Baptist on a platter." And he's like, "Oh my goodness!" I've talked myself into a corner, and he couldn't get out. But anyway, that's still, yeah. So
Right.
yeah,
It's exactly right. And we're no stranger to the from the Old Testament work we've done here of there are women who are tricksters is the term, that they're because they have to be, because the legality, they have nothing except what their husband says. So when you're the wife of, a would-be dictator like here, his wife, whose name completely escapes me. Herodia, that's it. Yeah, good work. Herodia is very, she must have taken his name actually, but she's a trickster, but in a more evil, conniving way, and I wonder, maybe she's, I'm trying to give up, I know I'll be crucified for this, but I don't care. But you can say I'm leaving. It's like the DeSantis's, you're familiar with the news that Ron DeSantis isn't really performing really well in public. It's kind of awkward and puts his foot in his mouth. Yeah, and he doesn't really like people, and his wife, however, Casey, is a bit younger and very talented politically, just a natural talent. And so now they're starting to include her in some of his speeches. He'll just say, "Casey, come up and speak for a little bit," and then he stands awkwardly like a robot, and then she's warm and she's apparently the one running his campaign. They need some other advice. Yeah, Joe Biden's similar too. You're right, but I guess I'm equating, the kind of puppetry a little bit of what's going on. It's almost like Herodia would have been the more appropriate ruler, but she can't because of the traditional, right? Well, she's not the blood relative. So she is kind of manipulating things, but that's actually going to get covered in a few chapters. So probably should press on.
Just to say
Yeah.
that there's a little footnote that I thought was really interesting where Jesus said, "Did you expect to see a reed shaken by the wind?"
Yeah.
And they said that could be a reference to Herod Antipas because
Oh yeah.
under his rule, the coins had reeds on them.
Oh,
So when he's talking about a
Neat.
reed, it might not be. I mean, it's a beautiful image just by itself, but it could also say, like, were you expecting to see the downfall of a palace?
Right.
Like, what were you expecting to
Mhm.
see? I thought that was just interesting. I would never have picked up on that,
Yeah,
but a contemporary person would have known reeds meant Herod Antipas.
exactly.
So that's
And then by
kinda cool.
contrast, soft robes was what the NRSV called it. Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal palaces. Those who are wearing purple and all those fancy garments, the gold and everything, that's for royalty. It's a bit of the render unto Caesar kind of dialogue from Jesus saying,
Well, he supposedly.
John was the real deal.
Soft though, right?
Right.
And that's all burlap. That's not soft at
Yeah.
all.
Again, it's just like Jesus himself, pointing to John as the example of here's a real prophet, you know, here's what somebody who really means what he's talking about.
Mhm.
And then he quotes, of course, Isaiah, see, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you. And then he equates him to Elijah, which is very common for John, the prophet Elijah, who's mostly covered in First and Second Kings, I want to say. And the prophet had wild, crazy hair and was, you know, kind of out on the fringe of society and stuff. So the parallels between him and John were very similar.
Taken up into heaven in the.
Yeah, a chariot of fire. Dun, 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 dun. Exactly right. So I think, you know, whenever we're talking about John in the New Testament, they are looking at John through every lens. Everybody's looking at John through the Elijah lens. You know, this is our Elijah. I also love verse 17, what he quotes, which is from, look in the footnote. I don't know why it's offset. It must be a song. It's not from the Old Testament.
It's not a
I don't
song.
think. No, it's from other gospels, but we played the flute for you and you did not dance. We wailed and you did not mourn. It's like children sitting in the marketplaces. Just an interesting description of the current generation. You know, it's like there's music and you're not dancing. There's wailing and crying and you're showing no emotion. You know, that's interesting. And then he makes fun of himself. They say, you know, who's they? Who knows? But Jesus, word has gotten back to Jesus that they think because he's changed water into wine, presumably that's another gospel, of course, or because he loves to go to dinner with people and stay late and eat all their food and drink all and tell stories. They're calling him a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners, and he loves it. Kind of eating it up.
He's also just saying, I think, like, if you're gonna doubt, you're gonna doubt. There's nothing John can do. There's nothing I can do. There's no behavior that would win.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it's going to have to be, it's not finding a set of behaviors that's gonna convince you. It's gonna have to be a leap of faith. That's kind of how I took it.
Yeah, it is. Other thoughts, everybody? Comments, questions? I guess we can move on. Would anyone like to read verse 20 to the end of the chapter? Ends on a bang, I'll tell you that.
Okay,
One of the great quotes. Yeah,
I'll end.
I think it ends on a bang. I built it up.
Okay. He began to reproach the towns where most of his miracles had been worked with their failure to reform. It will go ill with you, Chorazin, and just as ill with you, Bethsaida. If the miracles worked in you had taken place in Tyre and Sidon, they would have reformed in sackcloth and ashes long ago. I assure you, it will go easier for Tyre and Sidon than for you on the day of judgment. As for you, Capernaum, are you to be exalted to the skies? You shall go down to the realm of death. If the miracles worked in you had taken place in Sodom, it would be standing today. I assure you, it will go easier for Sodom than for you on the day of judgment. On one occasion, Jesus spoke thus, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, to you I offer praise, for what you have hidden from the learned and the clever you have revealed to the merest children. Father, it is true, you have graciously willed it so. Everything has been given over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son but the Father, and no one knows the Father but the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and find life burdensome, and I will refresh you. Take my yoke upon your shoulders and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart. Your souls will find rest, for my yoke is easy and my burden light.
Beautiful.
That one makes it onto pillows.
That sure does. A pretty good one.
Yeah.
Can I read that from the Message?
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it's
Beautiful,
pretty
yeah.
cool. It says, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly.
Isn't that
Wow.
great?
The unforced rhythms of grace. I thought that
Isn't that
was beautiful,
wonderful?
actually.
Yeah.
You know, we talk so much in the church, in all the Judeo-Christian traditions, we talk about the Sabbath being your rest day, you know, and that on the seventh day God rested and all that. But here, I love it. And I'm kind of hearing it with fresh eyes for some reason, that Jesus is saying, let me show you how to rest.
Mhm.
You know, stick with me and I'll actually, you know, we'll go take a walk, or I'll go take you to a vineyard in Shenandoah, right? And sometimes God, yeah, for me, take me to Saugatuck, you know, and I will show you what rest looks like. And it's really great, because you kind of have to sometimes you need God's help. When we say in baptism, I will with God's
Mhm.
help. Sometimes I will rest with God's help, you know. What a great passage.
Has anyone ever heard the little saying about how, like, row, row, row your boat is a guide to life?
No.
Oh.
Tell
It's
me.
just this, like, the whole guide, it's kind of silly, but I find it useful. I think about it a lot. It's like row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. So what should you be doing? You should be rowing. You should stay in your own boat. Don't go row other people's
Stay in your
boat.
lane.
Which way how should you should row gently. So stay in your boat, don't stop rowing, but row gently. And then should you head upstream? No, you just go
Yeah,
down the
go
stream.
with the current.
Stay in the rhythm of grace. Stay in your own boat. Don't stop rowing. Be gentle.
Mhm.
And I think about that.
That's
It's,
awesome.
it's so simple, but I think about it a lot. Like, am I getting in someone else's boat? I do.
Yeah.
A lot. Like, no. Have I, like, should I stop
Beautiful.
rowing? Keep rowing. But if you're going upstream or it's too hard, like, try to go gently.
Yeah,
And this is kind of what this reminds me of. Like, just go gently.
you're so right. And I think that's also, she just gave you a textbook example of how to preach.
Mhm.
You know, how to take a passage. No, yeah. We'll find that day. We'll make sure you're preaching that day, because that's really what it is, you know, just kind of extracts the meaning for you. Yeah.
So parse out the life is but a dream part for me.
Right? I mean, I guess
That's what I was gonna ask, yeah.
That's gonna take a lifetime to learn.
sometimes when I was like just in a struggle, I had like a spiritual advisor person who gave me good advice. And she's like, Charity, it's so hard because this isn't home.
Right,
This world is not home.
right.
There's just enough beauty so you don't lose hope.
Mhm.
But when you feel like it's hard here, it's because it is hard here. This is not Eden. This is not home. This life is not really it.
Yeah,
And so I think that's kind of where, I mean, because I've thought about this a long time. Life is but a dream. It's like, yeah, it's hard and we're here, but this isn't forever. This is a short period of time and we have work to do, in my opinion. Sorry, I'm getting preachy, but
no, you're right.
there's stuff we have to do here and things to learn and people to love. But is this it?
Right.
I mean, not in my opinion. I
That's the
think
dash, that's the dash between the day you're born and the day you die.
Yeah.
That's what you do in there.
I love that,
Exactly.
Diane. I love that it's a dash.
The
It's a book,
Oh,
the dash.
Mhm.
Oh, you
Yeah.
should have taken credit.
that's a profound
No,
thought.
The dash.
It's a lot of.
I've heard that's
different
too, I've heard, I don't know if I read the book, but I've heard that
Yeah.
about the dash.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But so yeah, life is but a dream. Like, if it sucks, it's gonna be over.
Exactly.
But
No, it's true. And, you know, elsewhere, our sufferings are temporary, you know, even if they're going on for years, still temporary in God's eyes. Yeah.
but that's kind of how that's what
Life
it
is but
made
a
me think
dream.
of.
Yeah,
Stay in your own boat. That's my big one.
Mhm.
I love it. I just want to be in a boat now.
Yeah.
One of the editors of the CEB Women's Bible writes this about rest. Jesus never intended his daughters, this is to a female audience, to experience the hectic and frenzied lives of this modern age. In his message of love in Matthew 11:28, we discover the promise that we'll find rest through intimate kinship. Jesus reminds us that he is concerned with our well-being. He gently encourages those who struggle hard and carry heavy loads to embrace his offer of abundant rest and peace. Jesus willingly assumes our struggles and pains and completely understands our fragile human condition. As we succumb to comparison, materialism, and idolatry of busyness, Jesus awaits our surrender. As we are overwhelmed by exhaustion, the deluge of responsibility, and the daily obligations, Jesus invites us to cast all of our cares upon him. As the gospel song goes, Jesus knows all about our troubles. Within his perfect embrace, we are assured a safe place to liberate our worries, release our fears, and unload our guilt. In Jesus, we find rest for the soul. Great. It's always good time to, clergy especially, to remind you that it's rest is a commandment.
Right. That just called to mind, speaking of church music earlier, that
Yeah.
just also for me called to mind one of my very favorite hymns, which is the theme of by Thomas Tallis, that I heard the voice of Jesus say,
Yeah, beautiful.
come
piece.
unto me and rest,
Yeah,
lay down thy weary head,
so great.
thy head upon my breast.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I'll have to find that piece of music
It's
next week.
it's lovely. And Vaughan Williams's instrumental expansion of Thomas Tallis's theme
Yeah.
is just luscious.
Oh,
But to hear that simple anthem sung
Yeah.
a cappella
Mm.
is just
so great.
just
You
raises the
can't
hair
help,
on
and
the
then
back of
the
your neck.
musicality, I think I've sung it before too, when I was
Mhm.
in a choir once, but the musicality makes you want to rest as you're listening to it. And
Yeah, absolutely.
not fall asleep, but just before that. Mary, you kind of had an audible, I don't want to say a moan of peace or something. When we finished reading it, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. What, what,
Well, finished the reading, in the message, you were, you just seemed really moved by it. The
I-
come,
you mean what we just read?
yeah,
Or you want me to, I'm sorry. I can't read anything here because the glasses I have don't allow me to, but yes, I was very touched by this. And, I was just gonna say that, in some version of the Bible, it's one of the things that I have memorized and say to myself. And I really appreciate all of your comments on this because I think all of us have those times when there just isn't, anything you can say, and you recognize that your energy is spent. And as my psychologist would say, that's okay. Just, that's where you are right now, and don't worry about it. And these verses tell us that it's really okay, you're going to be fine, and I'm with you, and lean on me.
amen.
And there's whose song is it? Lean on me. Somebody famous.
Is it Withers? Is it Withers or?
Yeah, Paul Simon.
Yes, Paul Simon is one of my favorites. And then in the New Yorker magazine this week, they have a section on Paul Simon the mystic.
Oh,
He's
Paul
losing his
Simon.
hearing.
Paul Simon,
Oh,
the
no.
singer?
yeah. Wow. Oh, Susan, you're muted. There we go.
Also want to unmute. My
Oop,
Nope.
oop,
Now you're muted again.
you're still muted. One
do it
button.
the other way. Interestingly, on Paul Simon, when he formed a group, it was Wings.
Oh, that's
No,
Paul
that's Paul
McCartney.
That's Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney.
Sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Hey, it's all good music.
Yeah.
Simon would be Simon and Garfunkel.
Exactly.
In his solo
Did
song
he go to Africa and
to make
study
Graceland, yeah,
mysticism?
Bridge over troubled waters.
exactly.
Well, he didn't write that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He wrote,
Garfunkel.
he wrote Bridge Over
He didn't sing it, but yeah.
That was Art Garfunkel sang it.
Oh, okay.
I really love, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I really love the songs that he does in the in Africa with the African music, and he really rejoices in all of that. And the fact that at the time that he was singing, that he was in Africa and getting their music involved with what he was singing. I really liked that.
It's
Yeah,
great.
that band is called Lady Smith Block Mambazo.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's
That
who
was the
he-
name of the group.
They were already quite famous
Wow.
in Africa. And he asked that kind of was a collab.
Yes,
When
exactly.
we took it as he went and learned some things, but it was just a collab. with-
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And
Yeah,
it was different
they're
than,
fun. I've seen
he didn't take their music and, you know, whiteify it, so to speak. You know, he actually brought them in and,
Yeah,
and
it
let
was
them perform. Right, yeah. Great.
Um,
Anyway,
back to the idea
Yeah.
of rest. I have a friend who struggled with depression, like a lot of us do.
Yeah.
And one of the things she would tell herself is she'd read, "The Lord is my shepherd," right? That, but there's a part where it says, "He maketh me lie down in green pastures."
yeah.
And she's like, and I just keep thinking, he's making me. He's not inviting you to.
Right,
He's not recommending it. He's like, here's a green pasture and you're laying down.
yes.
So she's like, because some days when I can't get out of bed, that's what I think about. I think, well, okay, well, my bed's a green pasture and I kind of don't have a choice. I have to lay down today.
Yeah,
And she was trying to spin that to a way where she's like, because how do you feel God's hand in depression? So it was kind of a struggle for faith at that point. And that's what she found comforting. Was it wasn't God it wasn't a force of evil in her life, that it was inconvenient and difficult, but she could still feel like God was with her there,
right.
even though she couldn't get out of bed.
And it's
And I
always,
thought that was helpful for
it's
me.
beautiful and it's overcomable. Is that a word?
Yeah, yeah.
But you sometimes, it's just like that same Psalm 23, you have to go through the valley to get out. So you kind of have to be, you can't skip it.
And sometimes you
I
have
have
to
to go through it.
accept that I'm gonna lay here today.
Right.
Like I'm gonna
I'm
keep
not
going
gonna
to my
do anything.
doctor, I'm gonna keep doing the things I need to do. And today, where am I at? Today I'm in bed,
Yeah,
and try to accept that
right.
and say, okay, God makes me.
Maketh me.
He's,
Or maketh me.
I'm kind of at this point for circumstances,
Yeah.
not having a lot of choice today about laying down.
So
And
true. It's
I
great.
think it's a really hopeful read on it, and this kind of going along with this idea of rest. I feel like we have this cultural aversion to rest,
We do.
and this
Yes.
idea, and that if we're gonna be good at something, we have to like do it hard and do it a lot. But this idea, Christianity should be comfortable and easy and restful. I'm gonna
Right.
grab that.
That's me.
Oh,
What's you want us?
it's,
I was just gonna say that, to me, I think rest it's one of those words, like David can always go and find different meanings for rest. And, you know, to me, rest doesn't necessarily mean you just sit around do nothing, which, I mean, back in the Old Testament, it seemed like that's what you had to even cook your food for the day of
yeah, you
rest.
still had to do something, right?
Yeah, you're not supposed to do anything. And to me, that wouldn't be restful to me, just to
Right.
sit around and do nothing for a whole day. I think rest means inner rest,
Yeah.
inner peace. You know, do something that makes you feel more at ease.
That takes you out of yourself.
Yeah.
Also. For
Exactly.
me, you know,
Makes you happy.
artwork or listening to beautiful music or something, or painting, or when I used to sit at my potter's wheel, all the cares of the world just kind of disappear. That's a kind of rest as well, even
Yeah.
though it's not, you're not in the prone position in a field, but you know,
That's rest.
but you're letting everything else go. You're going gently down the stream. You're not, you know,
Yeah,
you're not
very
constantly
well.
fighting against white water.
Yeah.
For me, I have a real hard time, and I think this is why I think I may have ADHD. I have such a hard time. I have tried so many times over the years to establish a practice of meditation or, you know, silent prayer.
It sounds like you have it in your
Chatter,
potter's
chatter,
wheel, though.
chatter,
You
chatter.
just described
Yeah.
meditation beautifully.
Yeah, you know,
It's
I keep
beautiful
reading
description
things.
of it.
I keep reading things, you know, like when you're actually trying to just sit for 20 minutes and, you know, don't fight those thoughts, just let them come and go. And, you know, but my brain will be saying, yeah, but it won't go. But, you know, but I have found that there are certain activities placid activities that kind of
Ooh, that's a
give
good
me
word.
rest.
But that can be meditation.
But
And I think we
Yeah.
have to force ourselves into one. Like,
Yeah,
just-
rest is, there's all kinds of
think-
rest, buddy, yeah.
I just
I
think that,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, please. No, well, I was
I
just
was
gonna say real quick that, go ahead, Mary. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that, that's what the Sabbath has come to mean to me. And sometimes it's not always on Sunday.
Right.
But a day when, I just try to slowly go and then try and be more open to, God's voice. And, when I can do this, I try to play the piano and do the things that feed me. You're like you said, and it's another concept of Sabbath. It's just that sometimes you have to have a Sabbath day, quote unquote, other days. But yeah, Greg, I wish we could talk sometime because I do have ADD and I struggle with just what you elucidated there.
Yeah,
Just focus and attention is difficult for me sometimes.
it's hard, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what else, you know, what I talked a little bit about before, I'll give you one little quick gem of my own personal theology. I really buy into and cherish the notion of co-creation. I always felt like I was co-creating
Mhm.
when I was making something, sitting at the potter's wheel,
Yeah.
playing the piano, whatever. I love that notion, and when you think of the artists, the musicians, the dancers, the writers, the scientists, they're all co-creators,
Mhm.
you know. It gets a little churchy and a little wordy when you're talking about doing God's work, but when you get right down to it, that's kind of what we're all doing.
Creativity. is
Totally
God's word.
inadvertently
Yeah.
most of the time,
Absolutely,
but we are co-creating this world that we live in.
yeah,
You know, in the microcosms, like 5 people sitting around the table, or in terms of society in general, or whatever, we're all co-creating in our own
it's
ways.
true, and I wanna say that that's also special to humans. I don't know that we
Mhm.
create things for art's sake, you know, or for entertainment. I don't
Mhm.
think, I can't think of other species that do that, and they obviously create
Mhm.
your life and all, but I think that is one of the things that makes it different. But David, what were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
You're muted,
I
David.
was just going to affirm kind of what Mary was saying about taking this whole thing back to the Ten Commandments and the idea of Sabbath and a Sabbath rest, and that how at the time the Sabbath was established, and it began to develop into this whole complicated system of rules of that almost made Sabbath not restful. It was more keeping certain rules and regulations, and yet when it comes to Jesus' comment on Sabbath and rest was that the man was not made for the Sabbath was made for man, and that the
Right.
idea was the idea of rest and Sabbath, not the idea of, you know, strict adherence to a list of rules, but was something that was good for us and something we needed so much that God demonstrated it to us right at the very beginning of creation, and something that we should all practice at one level, you know, however best we can. However, the Sabbath is a time of rest, relaxation, and communication with God, and how we can best do that, it's going to depend on the individual. It's not going to be determined by certain strict rules and regulations.
Yeah, and if I believe it's in this gospel later, but when he has that tussle with the Pharisees over Sabbath, he basically said something to the effect of, I am the Sabbath, you know, or insert an expletive in there. I am the flipping Sabbath.
Mhm.
And I think in light of what we just read, we can say, oh, that tracks. Yeah, he is the rest.
Mhm.
I think he calls himself Lord of the Sabbath, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I was paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Greg's
Yeah,
gospel.
no, you're right. I'm agreeing with you. Yeah, absolutely.
My translation has expletives in it.
You know,
Sorry.
it's also significant that, you know, Jesus himself would take time out. He would go to the wilderness. He would go and pray.
Right.
And oftentimes after, you know, there were crowds and he was doing all this stuff, and it's just, rather than pressing on and keeping on with this important business, you know, even he had to recharge, even he
Yeah.
had to reconnect
Mhm.
and kind of maybe reaffirm why he was doing all the things he was doing.
Yeah, I love the
That's
idea of gets on the boat to get away from everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't,
Gently.
I don't think you can effectively minister when you're constantly, or, be the kind of person or the Christian or whatever that you want to be if you're always busy. I think that time of reflection and contemplation, however you best do that, you might meditate or whatever, you might meditate through works of art or music or things like that, but you need to get in touch and grounded with, greater reality. I think that doesn't come about necessarily always in the busyness of the moment, but it was necessary for God, it was necessary for Jesus, it's just as necessary for us.
And I think that getting outside is another way, to be in nature and be quiet is that's something that happens to me the minute I open the door and go outside. But being in the woods, I go to Pilcher Park sometimes, but just being outside and seeing that the world is bigger than what's going on in your own head, and it's pretty beautiful sometimes.
I think it's been said, I think Richard Rohr says it, and I'm not sure if he's quoting someone else or not, but he says that nature is the first great revelation of God. Before even the Bible, before anything else, the first revelation of God, the one that we can all be in touch with, whether we have the Bible or not, is creation. That creation somehow speaks to us on that level, Mary. I agree.
I love that. Yeah.
You look like you're agreeing, Diane.
I was, when she said going outdoors. I've
Mhm.
turned my backyard into a sanctuary for the rabbits who eat all my plants, the squirrels that try to do it. I figured I might as well sit out there and watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did,
Do they trust you and they come out
Yeah,
and do it?
I've come as close as a foot away from the rabbit that
Mhm.
is living in my backyard.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and I actually put down, I found that she likes the bird seed that I feed the birds, so I throw down a bunch for her and
Squirrels.
she's right there,
Yeah.
she's right there. And I just sit in my swing and I watch. And I'm going, this is great,
Mhm.
this is wonderful. Yeah, and my little Hummer comes flying through. I'm going, good, you're
Yeah.
and I try to talk quietly. I don't have a quiet voice,
Mhm.
so they know that it's me.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel connected.
I love
I
Absolutely.
feel
that.
connected. Yeah.
It's kind of like
And if
channel.
you can sit still long enough and hold out your hand, and there are chickadees, I regularly in Michigan anyway, the chickadees will come and land on my hand to get the food. It's just a quiet communication that you can establish if you have the patience.
I was looking through this mail order catalog yesterday. There was this thing you could buy, a hummingbird feeder that it straps to your hand.
Oh, really?
That
Oh,
you can put on your hand, and if you sit real quietly, the hummingbirds will come and feed out of that feeder out of your hand,
Wow.
according
Wow.
to this
Yeah.
catalog.
It takes a while. It takes a while.
Well, we're pretty close to time, so we probably should stop there, and then next week you can begin chapter 12. I'll be at a conference next week, but you all enjoy
Okay.
chapter 12. This was a great discussion. Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Leslie.
Bye.
Bye.